Hi, how are you doing? Welcome to It's Way Past Your Berto Time. My name is Umberto Castañeda, and I'm sorry it's been a few weeks since I posted a video, but that's because I've been working on writing a book, and it's been very busy. And I started writing it when I was in college, so, 100 years ago. But I didn't really know how to write. I still am just learning. I've never written a book. This is the first one. But I never knew the steps. I just had this idea in my head because I was reading Michael Crichton novels like crazy back then. And I just wanted to write a novel that was like a Michael Crichton novel. And I had this idea keep in mind, this is 1993. So before you say, oh, it's been done. Well, sure, but it was 1993. So cut me some slack. Because my idea was, all right, it starts in the Arctic. And there are these nanobots. And there's this swarm of them, and they come after. I know, it sounds familiar. But this was before Michael Crichton's Prey novels, certainly way before Big Hero 6 and stuff like that. I'm not saying I was like way ahead of time. Nanotechnology was already a thing in the tech world and whatnot. But still, I thought it was a good idea. By the way, I probably, sadly, because I love the guy, but I probably could have written a better version than the book Prey, which is one of my least favorite Michael Crichton books. I'm kidding, of course, but I'm kidding that I could have written a better one, but that one was just not good. It's just not good. So I started with that idea, and I wrote like a prologue, essentially. I thought it was good. It's my first thing I ever wrote, so it needed work, but it did have a little bit of suspense and a little bit of intrigue. And then throughout the years, I was like, I want to write that book. And I just never did. I never put in the time. I never did the research on how to even do it. And frankly, I didn't read enough books to just kind of get a sense of what I should do. But years went by, and every now and then I would tinker with it. And then slowly it started evolving a bit more. The idea did. And I started actually being able to write a little bit more. My first, what I'd call mini breakthrough happened 10 years ago. 10 years ago. Or maybe actually more like 8 years ago. I was working in a company, and a coworker of mine was a very talented writer in their own right, pun intended. He actually challenged me. He's like, why are you not writing it? Because I gave him a little bit of the idea, and it had evolved a lot by then. He said, why are you not writing it? And then we had a session where he kind of like helped me think through things a bit and had really good ideas for me. And I got excited. And I took a trip down to Santa Monica. It was a business trip, but then I took a few extra days, locked myself in the hotel room, would take walks on the beach, and I wrote. I didn't write as much as I'd like, but I did write. And so I got a little further with a narrative. Not much, but a little further. Mostly outlining ideas. And then I had a trip to, not Hawaii, to Mexico. And on the flights there and back, I wrote a lot. I wrote a lot more than I had before. And so I got more inspired. But I still didn't really know the process. And I didn't really know how to make a character arc. I didn't really learn about 3-act structures and all these things. So I was still stuck. And I certainly didn't put in the time day to day. Then years go by. And then last year, something really interesting happened. I went to my brother's wedding, and at the rehearsal lunch, by the way, the rehearsal lunch was very interesting because my mom decided that she was going to have the rehearsal happen. Like it was, a lot of times they do these rehearsals for weddings where it's like you do the rehearsal and then you have a dinner, something like that. That's pretty usual, right? This was different. You had lunch first, and then we were going to go do the rehearsal. Which sounds fine. You don't want people hungry. Except the booze. There was booze. There was free booze. And so people got loaded before the rehearsal. And man, there was drama. I'm not going to spill all the beans because, it's not my wedding and stuff like that. But there was drama. But anyways, at the rehearsal lunch where we were drinking a little bit too much, I'm sitting next to my brother's officiant, the guy that got them married, essentially. Super interesting guy. Super interesting. And I got to say, he kind of changed my life a bit. He is a coach. His name is Gerard. He's amazing. I'm going to link all sorts of things about him. I'm going to make a video endorsing him. This is kind of an endorsement of him, but I'll be making a special shorter video just for him to use. In this lunch, we were talking, and he's a life coach. So if you know the type, you just can't have a conversation with them without them just immediately like life coaching you. And that's what happened. So, hey, casual conversation. So what are you up to? Not much. I'm just, I'm trying to write this book, but. And then he's like, oh, I don't know. What, you're trying to write it or you're writing a book? And I was like, oh, well, I mean, I want to write a book. It's like, oh, what's stopping you? And immediately I'm like, oh, geez. Oh, no. This is putting me on the spot. Well, I want to do it. I just don't have the time. Oh, well, that's too bad. What would it take for you to have the time? I'm like, I don't know. I'd have to quit my job or something. I have no idea. I just don't have the time. Interesting. Well, what would it take for you to write, 10 pages? What would it take for you to write 10 pages? And I thought, oh, well, I could probably write 10 pages. I would, but what would incentivize you? Like, what would get you to do it? I don't know. Maybe if I had to lose some money if I didn't write the 10 pages. He's like, oh, okay. How much money? Well, I don't know, like $200 or something. Okay. So then he ups the ante. He's like, all right, well, what's a goal you would set for yourself that you could do, that you could really do? And then it just inspired me. And I mean, the conversation was longer than this, but this is kind of the gist of it. And it's like, it put me on the spot and I thought, I'm going to do this thing. So I made a deal. I made a deal with my brother and Gerard. I sent my brother some money via Venmo or one of those apps. And I said, look, bro, you're going to put this money. And it was more than $200. It was a lot more. I was like, you're going to hang on to this money for 30 days. And at the end of those 30 days, if I haven't written 100 pages for my book, double spaced, 12-point font, which is what they tell you to do for your manuscripts. I'm not breaking any rules, but 100 pages, which I figure is about a third of the size that I want the novel to be. It's a young adult sci-fi, not too far in the future. They tell you your first novel for young adults shouldn't be more than 80,000 words and stuff. So I'm like, yeah, 100 pages will get me to like through the first act. 30 days, if I don't send you 100 pages of my book, you're going to donate this money to the Trump campaign. Now, if any of you out there are Trump supporters, you're like, wait, what's the problem? That sounds great. Why would you just not donate the money? I happen to not be a fan, no particular reason. I don't know. I've always had a thing against narcissistic, egomaniac, psychopath, villains in movies. But anyways, long story short, that was the agreement. 30 days to write 100 pages of my book. And will you know it? The money did not get donated at all. No, I did it. I did my 100 pages. It was hard, especially that last week. I had left too much to do in that last week. Because I thought, but I was also visiting my relatives in Colombia during the same time frame. And my thought was like, oh, I'm on vacation. I'm going to get to write. So that's not how it works. You're busy with family stuff and lunches and going here and going there, and travel takes time. I did get to write on the airplane flights. That was great. But I was way behind when I got back. And then I just had to like buckle down, and I wrote so much. I got a treadmill, a walking treadmill to write, and I would just go hours on end till the point I got like actual like knee pain, which is not so great. But I did it. I did my 100 pages. I was so proud of myself. I had never written that much ever for anything. So that was good. Now, my brother since confessed that he never was going to send that money, which sucks because he should have, but or he promised he would. But he told me he was going to lie to me and tell me he had, and then he was actually going to donate it to a good cause. I think that's probably for the best. But I knew there was no way on earth I was going to let him down. No way. Even if I had passed away somehow, my ghost would have finished those those damn pages. So I did it. 100 pages. And then I kept the momentum going for a bit. And I did 50 more. I got to about 150 pages. And a couple things happened. First of all, work got very busy. It really did. No excuse. It really did. That was one thing. But the second thing that happened was that I got to a point in the story where I didn't know what happened next. At a big scale, I sort of did because I knew where I wanted it to end and blah, blah, blah. But because I didn't actually have enough tools yet as a writer, I hadn't done enough research, I hadn't learned enough. I was stuck. I was basically stuck at the end of Act 1. Which is not an uncommon thing. That's what they say. The middle is the hardest part. They say that, and it felt that way for me. Or it was like the beginning of Act 2 is where I was. And like, man, I don't know what to write next. It feels a little random. Whatever I write feels random. Now, on the one hand, they tell you, don't worry, just write. Just finish your draft. Just keep writing. And that's probably right. Again, no pun. But it is not necessarily, it didn't feel like what I should do. It just felt random, like I would be in the wilderness, And the other thing that happened is I had a lunch meeting with a friend of mine who's an amazing artist. He used to work at Valve Software, the Half-Life folks, and just an amazing artist. And I was trying to explain to him my idea because I thought, oh, maybe if he could do some art, like some concept art, it might inspire me. But as we were talking, as I was describing the idea, I all of a sudden had an idea within the idea for something that I immediately thought, oh my God, this solves so many problems in the story for me. And it kind of tells me where I need to go next. It just really briefly, the basic story is about a kid who was a 15-year-old Colombian boy who moves to the States with his mom. I know, no similarities. And he's very much into this. Well, actually, this is what I realized, that he's very much into a video game. He's obsessed with this video game. But before I had that realization, there was no video game in the book story at all. There was other stuff that happened. He was like a hacker and he gets involved with some nefarious stuff. And that's still true. But I needed something. So what happened is I had looked at some videos, looked at a lot of materials, the master classes, all these things about writing. One of the things they talked about was, establishing the character's needs and wants and all these things. And pretty early in the story, I looked at Star Wars: A New Hope, and you get Luke's want almost right off the bat when you meet him. And there's that scene where he looks off into the sunset and you're like, oh, he just wants this better life out fighting with the rebellion. It's pretty clear. And I thought, man, what does my character want? And it was a little tricky because he's like this 15-year-old. What does a 15-year-old want? And so, in other words, it couldn't be something like, well, he wants to be a super successful entrepreneur. I mean, some 15-year-olds are like that. I have a friend who at 15 was making a killing selling baklava dessert, at SCA events, Society of Creative Anachronists, which is where they reenact medieval stuff and they pretend that they're in medieval Europe. And he would just go there with baklava and sell it to these people and make a fortune. But that's not every 15-year-old. So my 15-year-old is not savvy, by the way. He's pretty naive about the world. And so what is his thing? What does he want? And when I had that moment, I was like, oh, of course, he's huge into this one video game. And his main thing is he wants to be the best at it. And he wants to go compete in this annual, competition at their big conference. That's the thing he wants. And this is this big realization. And I thought, great. But then what happened was it made a lot of the stuff I had written have to change. Because I was like, oh man, I wrote all this other hackery stuff. Like he's a hacker. And a lot of it was fun for me because I was describing how he finds these secrets on this website and he looks at the HTML code and stuff. But it's probably a little on the geeky side and some people would love it. And I'm going to have a little bit of that in there still. But it was maybe too much. And then I was like, yeah, that's not going to work anymore. And there were other things. I'm like, oh man, I can't. So I got really kind of scared. How am I going to do this? How much am I going to have to throw away? I felt like 150 pages. I'm like halfway done. How much do I have to throw away? And then I got stuck. And I didn't write for a couple months. And then what happened is I thought, okay. What I'll do is I'll figure out the gameplay for the game so I know how to write it. So I took a detour and I started writing a game a 2D version of it essentially. And I took, I think, maybe 4 weeks writing a game. And I wrote enough of it where, it's got a randomly generated maze with bad guy monsters that you have to avoid because you have to go to these little terminals and solve these little puzzles. Someday I'll publish it. It'll be fun. It's a small little 2D game. But the point is, I wasn't writing. And in my mind, I'm like figuring out the game. But I tricked myself a little bit because I got really excited about making the game. And I put the writing completely on hold. And maybe it would have been okay if I was doing a little bit of the game, but then still writing. But I just felt so stuck. And then what happened? So then the new year started. And I was, okay, I'm going to write. And I started really trying to write again. And I would go in my room. Oh, no, but I forget. There was another thing that happened, which will sound totally trivial. It will sound totally trivial. I got a cat. So what? So you got a cat? Yeah, okay. If you've ever got a kitten, man, kittens are brutal. They just don't leave you alone. They have so much energy. So my little sanctuary of where I would write became stressful. Because first of all, I'd be trying to write and the cat's just jumping all over it, coming up to my face, sticking his face in my face, trying to scratch bite my hands, thinking I want to play with him. And I'm like, no, kitty, bad kitty. It's my papa, Like it's a problem. And then I think, brilliant. Close the door to the office room. Fine. Not fine. Scratch, scratch, meow, meow, meow. I can't concentrate like this. Who can write a book like this? So it seems trivial, but my sanctuary was defiled. I had this system. I would turn on classical music. It had to be classical music, especially with no lyrics. So I'd turn on like a Beethoven playlist, a Mozart playlist. And I know a lot of their stuff has lyrics, but not these. Chopin. Because if I listened to like my 80s playlist, I would just start singing along. And it's hard for me to sing and write at the same time because you're using like the same part of your brain. But classical music worked wonders. And I had to be on my treadmill because I'm a little ADD if you can't tell. So the kinesthetic movement would help me still remain focused. It was awesome. That's how I wrote those 150 pages. But now I had this cat intruding. Even if I put him outside, he was intruding. So then I thought, okay, well, I'll blockade so he can't get to the door. Great. Worked wonderful. No. You know what happened? Sitting there writing. I'm writing my book. Scratch, scratch. It's not the door. Scratch, scratch. I'm like, what's going on? Scratch, scratch. It's coming from like the bottom corner of my room, like by the wood down at the bottom. Next to the carpet. I'm like, oh my God, do I have rats here or something? What is this? Some rodent trapped in my walls? What's happening? Can you guess? Oh yeah. Stupid cat. He found a way to get inside my walls. I kid you not. So it turns out in the laundry room, there's these little gaps where the tubes from the laundry machine, what do you call these things? The washing machine and the dryer, they go into the wall. But they didn't cut the wood to fit, so there's a little bit of a gap. Just enough for a stupid flexible kitty to squeeze his little stupid head through it, get into between the walls, then go find where my office is and go scratch at the stupid walls. Oh my gosh. And so then I plug the holes at first I tried just putting rags. It didn't work, of course. He would just claw into the rags or claw through or pull them away. I finally had to do duct tape. But this happened much later. So by then it was all screwed up. I was so thrown off my game. The combination of the cat, me not knowing how to reconcile this new idea I had, distracted by the game. I was like, man, this does not work. But then January started. It's new leaf, new year, blah, blah. And I really started making some inroads for a second. Had a few productive days of writing. And then it happened. I got super sick towards the end of January, right before my birthday. Super sick, ER sick. No, I don't think it was COVID. I've thought it might have been many times because, man, I live right next to, a block away from where the big pandemic started here in the United States. I'm not kidding. Like where there was this retirement, like a elderly care facility that had a ton of people get sick and die, and it's right around the corner. And the first case in our area here was in late January, and then all those cases really started popping up in February. Is it possible that maybe, but it wasn't the same symptoms exactly. It's just that I've never felt sicker in my life. So, but it was like I did have stomach issues. It started with that, but then I never had a fever. I did have chills and a flushing feeling in all my body. I think I've traced it honestly to an allergic reaction to Ceylon cinnamon. I know you're thinking like what? And I am a little bit of a hypochondriac, quite a bit. So you'd think I'm just making this shit up. But no. Like I really do think it happened such that there's no coincidence here. 2 other times subsequently after getting really sick, I ended up having things that had it. And one of those times I didn't even know that it had it. And I had the reactions happen again. And when I found out what the ingredients were, it happened to include it. I'll talk more about this in some other podcast. But bottom line is I got sick for weeks. And it just threw me off the game on everything. I just couldn't do anything. But you know what? Then COVID started. And the lockdown. And this was weird because I had a choice to make. I could just implode with the whole thing. Depression and fear and all these things. And something happened. One thing, I started making these videos. I had been almost a year since I'd made videos and stuff. I started making videos. Second, I started working out regularly, every day. And hard workouts, I started eating better because I wasn't eating out at restaurants. So I lost 20 pounds since January. It's crazy. And I just started feeling better. And I started writing again. But before I started writing, it took me a bit. Gerard, the guy I told you about from the lunch with my brother at my brother's wedding, he contacted me. He was like, "How are you doing?" and everything. And I told him, actually, I'm struggling. So we ended up doing an arrangement for 3 months. We would meet every Thursday, and I paid him for his services as a consultation to just help me get unblocked. And I got to tell you, it was amazing. It was an amazing experience. I'll do a whole other episode about that whole thing. It was so good. But what it did is I didn't write immediately because I was still blocked and I was still kind of working through things. But what I started doing is I started doing a ton of research, just consuming everything I could about the writing process, how to develop your acts, how to develop a character, how to develop the arcs, all these things, looking at examples, tons. Just spent hours and hours and hours doing this and really thinking about it and watching a ton of videos from writers themselves, as well as published writers, people who teach this stuff, agents, all these things. And I started outlining. And I started outlining after seeing a lot of, and some writers don't outline and they just write by the seat of their pants, and that works well for them. And that might work for me as well if I'm more experienced. But this was a game changer for me. I outlined in a structured way. And not only did I outline, it wasn't just like, well, okay, I'll just write a shorter version of my story. I was solving for questions, specific questions. What is my character's need, their want? What was their big traumatic thing that caused the way they are, the thing they believe about the world that's not real? All these things that I could talk more about because all the stuff I've learned. I'll probably do separate episodes about that. But this was the thing I needed to unblock me because I wrote it. I wrote the 3 acts in a summary and I wrote it 3 different times. I wrote it, then I wrote it in more detail, then I wrote it in more detail, each time solving a little bit better. And it was enough. I started writing again. And now, and I took 2 weeks, these last 2 weeks to just write. That's why I hadn't been doing any videos. And I mean, when I say just write, I mean, I was pretty much just writing. I didn't watch shows. I didn't do these videos. I didn't work. I didn't do anything. The only thing I did is every time I would finish a big day of writing, I would play a really quick game of Age of Empires on my PC just to clear my brain. But other than that, that's what I did. And I wrote, I'm up to, So on pages, I'm up to 200 pages. So that's great. That's another 50 pages. But it's not real because a lot of those pages need rewrites. But that's okay because the first 5 chapters are fully real, fully rewritten. It was painful because I had to get rid of some babies, including that original prologue that I had been hanging on to all these years, the Michael Crichton-esque prologue. But I finally had to sacrifice some of these precious things to the writing gods so that I could actually make true progress. So even though there's still a lot of rewrites, and even though I still have 100 more pages to go, even on top of the rewrites, right? I know where I'm going. Oh, and by the way, I wrote the climax scene, the scene in the 3rd act that would be the climax. It's a draft of it. I'm sure it'll change, but I wrote it. And I'm no longer blocked. I know where I'm going. I'm excited to do it. It's so exciting. I can't wait. So this is great. That's why I've been busy. Just wanted to share that with you. Hopefully inspire you if there's something you've been trying to do. Like I said, I will do more videos about my process of what I went through to like unblock myself. It's really fascinating. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you again soon on It's Way Past Your Berto Time with Berto. And this is the part that I used to end it really awkwardly because these were all live streams. Now this one's actually a pre-recorded, but I'm still thinking that I don't know how to end it properly. You never know. End it properly.